This is an overview of the outline, which is what we'll be doing this week, creating an effective outline for a persuasive essay. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you some ideas about how to organize your ideas, how to build your strong thesis, and how to structure your argument. Why outline? Well, outline is really a great tool to clarify your argument before writing the essay. It prevents you from going off topic. It'll save you time during drafting because you'll know where you're going to go with each step. It also strengthens the logic and flow of your essay. And it'll make your thesis and supporting points easier to defend. It puts everything in order. With an outline, it helps you to take a clear position. It uses the evidence and reasoning to convince the audience you're building each time. It addresses the counterpoints, and it ends with a strong call to action. So you start with a strong thesis, and we've talked about thesis already, and there'll be more discussion of thesis, but the thesis must be a few things. It has to be arguable. It cannot be a fact. Gardening is good. Who's going to argue with that? It needs to be specific. You need to make one main claim. And sometimes it's easy to kind of get off, into, well, there's so many things I want to talk about, in terms of this topic, right? Whether it's banning books or gun control. And you'll see how the thesis will arrange different claims, different supports for the argument, but you don't want to go off on a totally different aspect of the topic that may not strengthen your argument. So, for example, gardening is good. Community gardening should be funded by local governments. That's an argument. Government should invest in gardening. Why? It provides food security, it strengthens neighborhoods, and it promotes environmental awareness. Very specific. Again, the purpose of the outline is to organize those main points, arrange them in a logical order, ensure that each section supports the thesis or the argument, and it can show you some gaps that may be missing, and it kind of plans where you're going. A standard outline structure begins with an introduction. An introduction often has a hook, something to drag the reader in. It can be a startling statistic, something that's unexpected, a rhetorical question. Typically, you don't use sources in the introduction, but you could use a kind of a attention-grabbing quote. Then you give a little background on the topic, which leads into your thesis. From there, we'll go into the first body paragraph, which starts with a topic sentence. Topic sentence reveals to the reader, it shows the reader what this paragraph is going to be about. Typically, in a 5-paragraph essay, which is not what we're doing, but we're doing an extension of that, it's always good to understand that 5-paragraph essay because it's a basic academic formula, and it is a good way to think of your essay. Whether it's longer than 5 paragraphs, which it will be, you can still think of it in terms of sections. So the first section or paragraph has a topic sentence which introduces the claim that you're going to present. Then we have the evidence, the explanation, and then you kind of connect it back to the thesis. You'll do this 2-3 times or as many claims as you have, and then offer a counter argument, a rebuttal, and a conclusion. Building that introduction. Again, the hook can be a surprising fact, a question, a brief story, the context or background, why this issue exists, why it's important, and then your thesis. Urban gardening programs should be expanded because they reduce food deserts, improve mental health, and build community resilience. It's another example. We talk about the body paragraphs, and you've seen, and you'll see there's another video in this course, and this is also one of the modules, is that integrated research sandwich. And it's basically the top bun, is the signal phrase. It introduces the quote. It is kind of getting ready to summarize the paragraph. Often you'll use words like according to, or, Jones states, or the CDC explains, or in the notes from the USDA, or the experts point out, or advocates. There's lists of signal phrases that you can find. I will post some in the announcements. After you introduce, you have your topic sentence, you introduce the quote, and then you have the meat, the cheese, the fixings. This is really the kind of the heart or the support, really, of the paragraph, and that's the paraphrased quote or summarized information. And then on the bottom bun, you comment on the significance, you reflect on it, and kind of tie it back to your argument. Here is an example. Studies show that teens struggle with early mornings, make classes challenging and potentially harmful. Research by Spencer et al. In a meta-analysis of 100 students found that early classes negatively impact teenagers, leading to increased health risks such as drug use, depression, obesity, as well as poor academic performance. That's the meat. Then we have that bottom bun that suggests that altering secondary school schedules to begin later would benefit student health and academic achievement. This would suggest that this paper and the thesis is focusing on the ability to have later starts in school. Another way of looking at the paragraph is a little bit more of the expansion of that integrated research sandwich, and that's the meal plan, the main idea, the evidence, the analysis, and then a link. The main idea is that topic sentence. The evidence is the meat. The analysis is explaining how it supports your claim. It's talking to, it's in discussion with the author of the source, and then linking it back to the thesis. Organizing supporting points. This is one of the reasons we do the outline. If you have 3 reasons supporting your thesis, each reason is backed by evidence, you think of a logical order that you would like to present them to the reader. Sometimes we do from the strongest point to the weakest, or sometimes we start out simply with what may not be the strongest supporting point, and we get to the most complex point that we're going to share. From there, we go on to the counter argument, and you'll be looking at this closer in the weeks to come, and your rebuttal. But it's important to be thinking of that, and you can do that in the outline. For example, some argue community gardens are too expensive. However, studies show they reduce city maintenance costs by repurposing vacant lots. So there's a counter argument and a rebuttal. Then we get to the conclusion where we restate the thesis in fresh language, summarize the key points, leave the audience with a final insight or call to action. In the conclusion, we avoid introducing new evidence. So you're really kind of restating what you've already said. And sometimes we tend to like diminish or take a shortcut or say, well, we've already said that. We don't want to say it in the same words, but after someone reads a 5, 6, 7, 8 page paper, they kind of get it. But the conclusion kind of reminds them what they've just read, and it packs it back up now in a way that they have a better understanding, and it's kind of like a final, I want to say final punch, a final presentation of the information in a concise manner that reminds them of what they've done. And then you've got that opportunity to ask them to consider it further. So again, if we look at just a sample outline, very short. If the thesis is local governments fund community gardens because they improve security, strengthen neighborhoods, promote them, then we have the introduction, and a hook might be there are food deserts in urban areas. There are places in the city where people have trouble getting to the grocery store. There's not enough fresh food easily accessible. Then we might talk about food security and have some evidence from the USDA data. Then we might talk about the social connection and the strength, and that's a second point. And then finally, environmental awareness, how getting people out and putting their hands in the soil and planting plants and seeing how important the earth is for us to live, brings about awareness, and then your counter argument and rebuttal. So with that, I want to just remind you again that the outline can take many forms. You've got one or two in the course as guides. It should be more than a bullet outline. It should really have a topic, sentence, a thesis, but it doesn't have to be written out paragraphs. But I encourage you to contact me if you need help, and I look forward to reading your outlines. Take care.